Hello and welcome back to the Second Messiah. On the last episode, Egica started a war with the Italians to our north, but quickly fell back and fortified the border, realizing his attack wasn't going to work. Meanwhile, Vithericus was making an attack against the Egyptians, assaulting their capital in a bloody battle where he first had to weaken up the enemy using ranged attacks as they defended the entrances to their town, but when they didn't budge, went in for a bloody melee that eventually escalated, and the entire battle was decided in one street. We took heavy losses, but won in the end. Now, in order to move further west, he was going to have to build a bigger and more powerful army, and he's recruiting his brother Garamantian to help him out with that. And the last thing we saw was Saphrax making a cheeky steal, taking Syracuse from the Italians and unifying Magna Graecia. Now let's continue. We should have known. History speaks of countless times before the empire matured when the cities of Italy would betray us for petty gains, and here we are again. They lie down and let their barbarian conquerors have their way with a people once proud and powerful. Some of our colleagues, as you know, even thought it would be wise to abandon their duties to go and help them set up their vile bastardization of our state. And the one man who left with truly noble intent, young Vithericus, seems to have been less silver-tongued than we hoped, and now will have no opportunity to improve on that weakness. So now we arrive to the business of the hour. The Gothic rabble raiding the border and terrorizing our people. They clearly wish to draw us out into an ambush of some amateur construction, no doubt. We will not be going out to meet them, if any of you were wondering. No. Instead, since we are currently in a situation where our own people have little interest in our mission, I propose a plan that requires little interest in them. The low intelligence of the Goths renders them easily scared. One big shock will destroy their appetite for war altogether. That is why, while the Gothic men feast on the people they wish to impress, we shall take our available forces to a surprise attack on a weak spot, somewhere further south, somewhere that needs reminding of what it means to be a Roman. I'll brief the commanders once we set sail. If you're all still alive when I return, I'll be expecting an extraordinary reward, so best start preparing now, eh? So we're back just after Saphrax has captured Syracuse from the Italians, but the Italians still pose a threat to us because they have launched their fleet away from Florentia and put it into the sea, meaning Egica is free to attack it, but of course the fleet can now potentially sneak behind my lines and attack me somewhere else, or just come straight back to attack Florentia if I was to occupy it. So we don't know what they're going to do, but Egica doesn't really care. He's determined to get the glory of capturing this settlement, so he rushes over. The garrison is still actually really big and has loads of legio comitatenses, which are quite strong, meaning the balance bar isn't all that far in our favour. Auto-resolve still appropriate though, so we demolish the enemy and move in with his lighter troops, the Falxmen, taking a good number of the losses there, but a decisive victory still. So we can occupy this settlement, which means we've now unified the province of Italia, also containing Nova Uium and Neapolis. That'll make it easier to manage this area once we've repaired the buildings here and generally got things in order. But of course we are now at the mercy of the Italians, who can attack anywhere down Italia if they want to, or move to threaten another location such as Tarentum. Wishing to slightly lessen the risk I'm taking, I decided to hire a new minor noble to command a small army that's going to sit in Nova Uium, basically a response force that might move anywhere the Italians deign to move, so that Egica can remain garrisoning this province. I'm just going to recruit some mercenaries in for now, so they have a few men, and then I'm going to start recruiting some actual units. I'm going for the Germanic ones because they only take half as long to recruit. On the subject of recruiting, I'm also starting to build up a new army under Garamantian, one of our best nobles, which is going to help Vithericus push west against the vast alliance of African empires out there. He is going to take his time and recruit some high-quality Roman troops to make his army as powerful as possible, and is going to mix in a few German ones as well. So now moving on, the Mazoon forces, who I've been worried about recently, continue to move west, going away from my territory for good it seems, so we'll see where they end up going. And then the Italians indeed moved their fleet south, going right past Nova Uium and ignoring it, and going for an attack on the less valuable Neapolis, but a location where they're much more likely to succeed. So perhaps their plan is to take this place and then go back for Nova Uium. and it looks like they're going to succeed because you can see from the balance bar this is not a good fight for us. But I decided to fight this one because I knew that since the enemy had to go to the trouble of making naval landings, I could do a little bit of damage against them and make sure their army was weakened so it couldn't do too much damage if it occupied Neapolis. To start the battle, I sent the 2 ships I had to immediately assault the enemy fleet, rushing out of port and heading right for the enemy commander's ship, who was on its own. The majority of their forces were off on a wing, meaning their commander was quite exposed. His ship full of Palatina guards should be quite easy to defeat because the unit isn't very good in melee and we're taking them by surprise. The enemy aren't a naval unit either, so they suffer from seasickness, reducing their stacks. So my raiders jump onto their ship and start fighting with the enemy. You can also see there were some fire arrows coming in. I've got an archery ship nearby supporting. I thought that ship was going to be boarded by the enemy. This enemy ship comes in real close, filled with spearmen who could jump on and kill the archers, but the spearmen seem to be under orders to just perilously advance, rushing towards the coast so that they can take the settlement. I don't know what they're rushing for because I have no reinforcements on the way. They could easily have supported their general, but they're going to go straight for the landing. On land, I've got a few men available to try and stop the enemy, vastly numerically inferior, but our position and defensive advantage gives us a little bit of amplified power, so we should be able to hold them for a little bit at least. I tried to set one of the enemy ships on fire as it went past, but the fire arrows were not enough. But I don't want to move this fire ship away from my commander raiding the enemy's commander here, just in case they're needed. And you can see on the balance bar, we are technically losing this fight it seems, but I believe my men being on board the enemy ship causes the enemy ship to suffer fire damage. We successfully kill their general, which seems to tilt the balance back in our favour, and the enemy's ship suddenly sets on fire, so I believe my men managed to achieve that even while fighting with the enemy. My troops escape the fire, jumping back onto my ship, which miraculously doesn't itself catch fire despite being in complete contact with their burning sails, and the enemy ship is left to sink. The crew abandon the ship and are very likely to drown with their heavy armour trying to swim back to shore, so the enemy commander has been assassinated, demoralising their army even before it makes its landing.
Excellent! Back to the ship, men. Let the dogs burn. Let the fires show the enemy what we make of Romans who won't submit their debt to us. Ha! The screams of their commander will echo across the bay and strike fear into those fools trying to make a point of landing. Cast out the sails again. We're going back for another round. I won't let them just walk into my house, will you? Even if we have to perish, we'll leave the enemy fishing their dead from the bloody wash for weeks. Ha! Just think of it. Whip the rowers until they die. Get me closer to the slaughter. I want to eat roasted Roman with a flagon of their blood in the afterlife.
The enemy's vast army of spearmen are able to make their landing unopposed, mostly choosing to land on the beaches to the west of the town, so they'll now rush off their ships and start forming up, ready to make an attack on the town. My towers have already started firing at them, and I've got one unit of Legio Comitatensis which is going to attempt to hold the position of the tower so the tower can inflict maximum casualties. We've got other units closer to the capture point, and the enemy is also making an assault in this area, so we need to be careful and make sure they don't sneakily capture the town behind my lines. Just landing spearmen once again. We're going to rush up the hill. Here they're actually quite close to the capture point, but I've got 2 squads of my own spearmen defending the approach. I'll have no particular advantage in that fight, but at least we'll hold the enemy off for a while. So the Legio on the tower capture point now receive the enemy, who appear to be planning to walk past and notice my men at the last moment, especially these pikes who attack completely out of formation and are going to suffer heavy casualties as a result. So they all start piling onto my one boy unit. They've got a massive numerical advantage, but my troops are better, and I have one unit freed up who starts to flank around some buildings to attack that blob in the rear. Meanwhile, the spearmen who landed near the capture point are indeed struggling to get up this little hill and fight past my own spears, so we're free from worrying about losing the town immediately. One unit of enemy spears seem to notice my rear attack and starts chasing them here, which in the battle I actually didn't notice, and this is actually going to cause quite a bit of an issue. My one unit of Legio is holding out heroically even as the enemy rush around to their rear flank. Luckily for me, they didn't actually conduct a flank attack, they just ran past, moving deeper into the town and taking losses from the tower. So now my men come in to rear attack the big blob facing the Legio from the front, routing one unit immediately. I had hoped it would have more of an effect and cause many of them to rout, but unfortunately most of them still stood there. Their units are mostly at full strength and they are relatively well trained Roman units. The problem now is that that unit of Comitatensis spears that was sneaking up behind me can rear attack my troops, so my Legio are surrounded there. Even worse, the troops who didn't rear attack my first Legio unit in the back are now rushing towards the undefended capture point, so we could be in serious trouble. The unit of Legio that got surrounded routs very quickly. They lost about a third of their men and then routed in just a few seconds. And the enemies who are rushing towards the capture point are proving even more of a danger. I pulled off one unit of spears from the southern approach to try and stop them. So the enemy troops get onto the capture point successfully, but now they'll have to fight with my men, and the fact that my men are on the capture point while this fight is happening will stop them from actually taking it, so I won't get any morale penalties from having lost the centre of the town. Although I am going to get morale penalties from the fact the enemy are rapidly going to surround this unit. They've only got 2 units fighting it at the moment, but soon they'll have plenty more. My archers here on the wall managed to rout an enemy unit of spears that got obsessed with fighting with the barricade, so that's good news at least. The bad news is that the main part of the enemy's force defeated the one unit of Legio left holding on against them, and it's now going to rush into the town. The tower that was firing at them and has been doing so well is going to be burned down as a result of them rushing over the capture point here, but we have already killed hundreds of enemy troops at this point, so it's going well. I now deployed my cavalry. I've got this light cavalry unit, which I managed to sneak by the enemy's vast array of spears to attack their one unit that was weak against cavalry, these archers. So I managed to inflict casualties upon them. The enemy spears see me doing it and come to attack, but I successfully shattered those archers before my cavalry made their escape, so overall that went well. The capture point itself is still a hotbed of fighting. I've got archers firing into the back of the enemy's guys who have me surrounded there, but they themselves are about to be attacked in the rear by the enemy's reinforcements now coming to attack the capture point. Overall, it looks like we're about to be completely strategically surrounded here in the centre, and that the last battle is going to be over the capture point, the enemy appearing to have quite a large advantage, no surprise. I've got more archers attempting to hold off the enemy on the south part of the approach. My men actually do successfully rout an enemy with help from the archers, but the enemy's numerical superiority mean that overall there's not much hope of holding on there. Further out, I accidentally dismounted my cavalry, believing I was clicking on a skirmish button, and once I realised I dismounted them, I decided to just fight with the spears who were nearby, which of course will not go very well. I'd hoped to draw them towards the tower, but at least fighting near the tower was still killing the enemy. Back inside the town, my men are about to go. The enemy have completely overwhelmed my men who are on the capture point, meaning they'll rapidly capture the town. My cavalry are dead, but the tower is still firing at this enemy unit. The unit comes in an attempt to capture this tower, but unfortunately for them it's not possible for one infantry unit to capture a tower without taking extreme losses, because the tower will just keep hitting them with bolts at point blank range. So that unit is going to be completely demolished and will shatter before it has any chance of capturing that place. We're still somehow holding on despite the enemy's massive superiority here. My archers not being terribly helpful. I was trying to get them to do point blank range shots into the enemy's rank using heavy arrows to damage them through their armour, but it wasn't doing much good. The enemy defeat my defenders in the centre. The town is now theirs. I just have a few units, including some of my naval archers who landed to try and take part in the battle once all of the enemy forces had landed, but they aren't going to do so well. The rest of my navy was playing cat and mouse with the enemy troops who hadn't landed, but most of them did land in the end, and my naval units were defeated in the process. There's that unit I mentioned being shattered by my tower, not being able to capture it, so that was good news. Another unit dispatched, not that it really matters at this point. I'm just using my archers now to kite the enemy around the town. And here you can see I'm basically kiting them into more towers. There is a hope that if my archers don't rout I could just keep doing this, but the archers don't want to continue the fight, so although I probably could have won in a completely ideal scenario drawing the enemy around in circles, eventually it had to be a defeat. That's fair for the enemy considering the balance part in their favour, but also fair for the defenders having done a decent bit of damage to this attacking army despite the overwhelming odds. So now I'll have a little look at the numbers to see how they did. We killed more than we lost, which is always a good start for a defensive battle. The enemy lost only 2 full regiments, both of them regiments who were sunk at sea by the naval actions. A lot of the rest of the enemy's units are going to replenish. However, they didn't actually take Neapolis, which is a key change. This means that Neapolis is still ours and we can repair it, and their fleet of course isn't going to now maraud further into Italia. I thought it might take it and then push on somewhere else. So actually that didn't end as badly as it could have done. The giants here in Nova Urium are going to move down to garrison Neapolis now, because there's nothing stopping the Italians just doing that again, and this time I'd have no garrison. But with that force there, we'd stand a pretty decent chance of defending it if they did attack again. Now we also saw one of the messages there was that Egica has wavering loyalty. I was going to get Saphrax to try and secure his loyalty, but Saphrax has almost completely lost his influence over our politics for whatever reason. I think as part of becoming our family, he seems to have spent it all, so Vithericus had to deal with getting Egica back on board. The ties of a bastard to his brother are said to be not even half as strong as those of true brothers. But what merit is there in such a conclusion? Consider that all of God's chosen share a common heritage in his blessing, and then further that I, as his taken son, no longer share a father with either of my noble brothers. You are thus no more a bastard than I, no more or less a man fit to lead the Gothic realm than Prince Geilamir. The people would not be able to sleep safely knowing that Egica the Axe was not conquering in their name, and nor would I. I want you to see fit to aid me in my mission, or at the very least to take up your own missions for the sake of our people. The Italian fleet moves west away from Italia, so it turns out they didn't plan to attack us again, which is useful. Now one of the minor nobles attempts to gain some power, adding himself to the companions perhaps, but Vithericus is not going to allow it because he's keeping pretty tight control of who owns power here in the Gothic domain, so we'll block him. And the good news is Vithericus successfully secured the loyalty of Egica, stabilizing him within our political power base. Interestingly, a lot of our allied fleets seem to be heading west towards Caralis, the Western Roman Empire settlement, and are hanging around near the Italians. Egica has now decided to get involved as well. He wants to head out towards Caralis and goes through Neapolis to mount his men onto a fleet for that purpose. So if Caralis is still there and my allies don't attack it, he'll be able to go and attack it for himself, because it looks like the Western Roman Empire don't have anyone around to defend it. I'm going to leave the army I recruited to defend against the Italians in Italia, just in case they come back or if anyone else does. And you can see here that Nova Urium is still undergoing construction, but the population is too low to actually rebuild the city completely, so there's now going to be quite a long delay before the city continues to be built up. Now later on, Egica is ready to continue his movement towards Caralis. It's going to be 2 turns before he can get there, so he can get part of the way, but most of our allies seem to have left the region going off on other missions, so it seems he is going to make it. Back in Africa, Geilamir is now recruiting a new class of unit, Gothic Palatina Defectors, an extremely powerful heavy infantry unit, basically a mix of Germanic and Roman units that should be very powerful. You can see Vithericus' army is now back up to full strength as well, having recovered from the losses it took whilst defeating the Egyptians, and we've also got Roderic's force in the area, more of a holding force that I don't necessarily intend to actually deploy. I am also now moving up new agents, priestesses all over the place to attempt to convert all of these territories to Arian Christianity and help control the public order, which is going to be a problem once I start my invasion. Moving into the spring, we've got a mission ordering us to build a church, or something from the church building chain. And that's interesting because I've actually been building those all over the place, and if that mission had come a little bit earlier, I probably would have very easily have succeeded it. You can see there's one here in Nova Urium, for example, but I don't have any building slots or ability to build the church anywhere, so that mission unfortunately looks like it's going to have to go unfulfilled. It just came at a very awkward time. Luckily, you'll see I do manage to find a way to succeed in this mission in just a moment. You can also see Theudis, who's currently governing Italia, has gained the trait of procrastinator, reducing his zeal. I guess he's getting too comfortable governing and overseeing the reconstruction, but that's not a huge issue for now. So Egica, with his movement points restored, can continue on to Caralis and begin a naval blockade. The force inside is not very strong at all. You can see he has a giant advantage on the balance bar, so he's going to be able to auto-resolve his way in. The enemy does actually have a decent-ish fleet. I think there's a military wharf here, which in an actual battle probably would have done a decent amount of damage to Egica's landing forces if they had tried to challenge him at sea, although the AI probably wouldn't have done. Anyway, an auto-resolve is easily enough to get rid of that fleet, and it seems our Falxmen took the brunt of the attack as they went in. Caralis is ours. Now I wondered whether I should just raise it, because this random island could be hard to defend and would be annoying to occupy. Egica ends up looting and occupying it, taking a mix of both approaches, so we now own the territory. He's taken his own little part of the world, but he's gone a little bit too far and has messed it up. The good news is that, as you can see at the top right there, I've somehow succeeded in my mission to build the church, because I've captured the destroyed Latin church here in Caralis. So this means the entire Ostrogothic domain now gets converted to Arian Christianity for a short while with a lot of zeal, meaning they'll convert very quickly. So that's useful. Egica is going to repair a couple of the key structures on the island and will leave the rest in tatters because he's just not interested in the civic development, and will leave the people themselves to repair them if they really want. Guylemir's force, now ready for battle, is moving up to support Vithericus now. We're on the cusp of our westward invasion with our holy conquering force. I'm going to add into his army these mercenary hurlers because he has no ranged units whatsoever, so having just one might be useful for something. I used a Maloric to check out what the enemy have. These are the Garamantians, the first kingdom we're going to have to get through as we move west. They've got a desolate settlement in their lands, but a lot of armies and a lot of good settlements as well. Moving into the end turn, the Visigoths, for some reason, decide to end their military alliance with me. Quite a suspicious move. It seems we've just drifted too far apart. The historic bond between our two peoples is over. There is much in your madness you have forgotten. Your obligation to your own cousins appears to be among this. Now, we do not wish to belittle your achievements in Italia and Egypt, but the fact of the matter is, you abandoned us, and we have fought to retake your homelands on your behalf ever since. And now, with our strength expended and little achieved, we see you, our supposed friends, hoarding the wealth of the world and claiming to be working with God himself, an outrageous affront to the bonds between our people. Never again are you welcome in the lands we still own, and never shall our people shed blood for yours. As we progress towards the next turn, we get some interesting diplomatic offers. First, the Garamantians, the empire we're going to have to attack moving west into Africa, wants a defensive alliance, and they're even willing to pay for it, so it seems they fear us to some extent and wish to get on our good side, but unfortunately for them, they're exactly in the target zone for Vithericus. So I thought that since they were here, we might as well do some hostile diplomacy. It would be nice to send the diplomat back with a new arrangement. They didn't want to become my tributary state, surprisingly enough, so it was time to declare war. I wasn't going to bring my allies in on this, both because I don't need them, they won't be much help, and because I don't want to risk my alliances. The enemy has an ally to their west who comes in, but that's not going to be a huge problem because we have prepared for a large war here, and now we're going to get it. So the Garamantian diplomat goes home with quite a different offer to what he sought. The Garamantians immediately start attacking us with agents. I have Amalric, my spy, out there looking out for Garamantian forces, but they unfortunately have an agent who's paralysed him. Luckily he's in a pretty convenient location to be paralysed, so I can actually still get information from that region. I have a decision to make. We've got excess building materials apparently. I can either ignore them, which doesn't seem useful, use them to build new things, or I can sell them. I'm going to use them to build things. This will give me cheaper construction in the next term, which we'll be able to use quite nicely. So now that the war has started, it's time for our forces to move out. Vithericus moves up to the border, where he's going to push on towards that port city, which is the capital of this province. Guylemir is moving up, and his target's going to be the town in the desert to the southwest, but upon looking at it here, I realised that all the routes down towards that desert town are going to give me attrition as I walk through them, because my people aren't used to walking through these harsh desert conditions. But unfortunately, there isn't really going to be another way. The only way I can make it slightly easier is perhaps to attack through winter, but I don't think it makes any difference. Roderick's going to move up to garrison the town, the easternmost town of Libya, because the public order is declining, and the public order back over in Egypt is now okay. Vithericus can't make his attack right away. I really should have declared war after having made these movements, but the opportunity to declare war was just too tempting. So now I'll have to wait a turn before we actually make any attacks on the enemy. The Garamantians start moving their forces about in the areas we can see. They seem to deploy forces from Western Africa moving east but then move them back again, so they are at least indecisive about what they need to do. But of importance, the two settlements I'm going to attack for now don't appear to have anyone defending them, so that should make life easier. Amalric's still stuck where he is in the desert, the enemy's agent still working against him. The new construction cost bonus is now in place, I'll be able to build some things this turn nice and cheap. We can now see the enemy agent though, so Amalric has a chance of deceiving him. If we can put a stop on the enemy's agent, there's a chance of escaping, although of course the enemy agent can just keep deceiving us right back. But I decided I'd give it a go. Of course Amalric has a bad history of attempting agent actions against other agents. Luckily this time he succeeded, so the enemy has now lost the ability to move their agent as well. These two men are stuck in a standoff in the middle of the desert. Vithericus is now ready to make his advance, and as I mentioned, there's no one defending against us, so we can just rush in. We don't have siege weapons, so we're going to have to construct ladders to get into the town, meaning we're going to have to wait here. The enemy could bring reinforcements up, but the distances involved here mean it's going to be very difficult for them to do it. Now for Geilamir with the Messiah's hand, he faces a dangerous march across the desert. First I marched up to the border, which gives me some attrition already. I thought I can probably use the Fortify to reduce the extent to which attrition takes effect by only marching part of the way and then using the rest of my movement points to construct a fort, meaning I won't take attrition during the end turn sequence, which I need to do because I can't reach the enemy's town in this turn. Unfortunately, I then had a moment of madness, thinking that if I went back into my own territory, I would just about still be able to make a fortification and might be able to regenerate troops whilst in a fort in my own territory, but unfortunately that used up too many points, so I wasn't able to discover if that worked. Seeing this, I decided I might as well just move on. We're going to have to take this attrition one way or another, so might as well get close to the enemy's town so we can go right in at the start of next turn and take it. I will be able to regenerate once I'm in the town, and the town itself is going to be undefended, so it'll be no contest. Even with the reduced strength army, it'll be very easy to take that region. Next I realised that Saphrax is going to be able to help out in this war. He can sail out from Syracuse to attack a Garamantian stronghold on the African coast here, far behind the battle lines that Vithericus will be working on, so this is either going to cause a distraction and allow Vithericus to move on more easily, or it's going to put Saphrax in danger. But he wishes to prove himself to Vithericus and fulfill Vithericus' request for help on his holy mission. Now this port assault is easy according to the balance bar, but I thought this would actually be a lot harder than it looked like on the balance bar, so I wanted to do it myself to make sure it's a fair challenge. So at the beginning of the next episode, we'll see how Saphrax lands his troops and of course the consequences of putting himself in danger. Episode, the Goths' war on Africa will continue in the next episode of The Second Messiah.